What's Underneath is a CastBox original produced in partnership with Studio 71.
CastBox is the fastest growing, highest rated podcast app on both iOS and Android, where you can find all of your favorite podcasts.
You can listen to What's Underneath wherever you get your podcasts, but we hope you'll give CastBox a shot and see for yourself.
Hello and welcome to What's Underneath,
the podcast that will inspire radical self-acceptance through empowering you to embrace what's unrepeatable in you.
I'm Lily Mandelbaum, and sitting next to me is my mom, Elisa Goodkind.
And we are StyleLikeU. In our new podcast, we are going to expand the types of intimate, unfiltered conversations we've been having in our viral video series, the What's Underneath Project.
Each week, we will interview diverse nonconformists about their relationship to style, self-image, and identity.
Being radically honest without shame and holding that honesty with compassion is self-acceptance.
So, Mom.
Lils, hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
So who are we here with today?
We are with Ashton Applewhite, who is an author and activist against ageism, something I'm super, super excited to be talking about today because it is, along with all of the other isms and intolerable prejudice and oppression in our society, that we are very excited to shed some light on here right now, and needs a lot of correcting in our society, in our culture. So very happy to be doing this with Ashton.
And Ashton, how are you feeling right now?
I'm terrific.
You're terrific.
Great to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're sitting in Ashton's beautiful apartment in Williamsburg and close to her garden, so you may hear some birds chirping throughout this interview, but we thought it was a nice touch.
And right literally above the L train.
And
so
also,
if you hear a rumble, it's the train.
So Ashton, can you talk a little bit about what you're, just like something that you're feeling really excited about in your life right now? Like what's kind of getting you up every morning that's like charging you?
It sounds cliched, but this cause feels really, really important to me personally, because we're way more afraid of aging than we should be. And collectively, because we're heading into a world of longer lives permanently. So it feels really important to me. And I feel incredibly lucky at 65 to be sort of hitting my stride on a subject that just is consuming. I mean, I'm a generalist. I could never figure out what to be when I grew up. I could never figure out what to major in college or whatever. And aging is the biggest subject there is. It's how we move through life and interact with each other and institutions. So the more I think about it, the more clearly I know the things that I know, and the more also I realize how much more I have to know. So I love that. So it's not like every morning I jump out of bed and go, yippee, but I feel caught up in something really fascinating and really important, and I feel very, very lucky about that.
Can you talk a little bit more about why you feel you're hitting your stride at 65?
I was always a super late bloomer. There are no pictures of me as an adolescent. I think that they just burned them out of kindness. And I didn't start writing until I was in my early 40s. You know, I never had a burning desire to write. I never imagined I would be a public speaker. I'm an introvert and the opposite of a performer. But it's all come together in the last 10 years that I've been writing and thinking about that I feel like I'm in the right place at the right time, and both that, skills like writing and thinking critically that I have frankly developed all my life, and also new challenges like public speaking and starting to become a public figure are all sort of crashing in and around me in a way that's sometimes terrifying, but thrilling. And I feel caught up in something bigger than myself. I feel like I'm a vehicle for this message.
What inspired you to latch onto this issue in particular? What were you going through when you decided to become an activist for this?
I didn't really decide to be an activist. Yeah. It sort of found me. I really do back into things. It's not like I had some clear vision by any means of where I would be. In hindsight, I started writing about aging, researching it really, when I was 55, because I was afraid of getting old.
Mm-hmm. So what were you going through at that moment, like in specifics, personally?
I was 55. I think, there was no specific moment where someone called me, a little old lady or anything, and a light went off. I had been sort of casting about for a new project to write about for a long time. And
So at that point, you were already writing, because you said you started writing around 45.
I wrote a book when I was 42 called Cutting Loose: Why Women Who End Their Marriages Do So Well, because I was getting divorced, shocker. And my attorney said, a lot of my clients are people like you. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, women who are realizing that they don't have to stick it out in unhappy marriages. And I went home and I found out in 2 seconds that that 2/3 of divorces in the U.S. are initiated by women. And I was astonished, because I thought it was 98% guys who were ditching their, ancient wives for fertile trophy versions. And I thought, why does this surprise me? Is marriage not so terrible? Is life after divorce not that bad? Why the discrepancy between what we think and the reality? Mm-hmm. And that was the genesis of a book. Mm-hmm. And 20 years later, a chance comment of my mother-in-law's. She said, why don't you write about something people ask us all the time? And she and her husband Bill were booksellers. They were in their 80s at the time. And she said, people are always saying, so when are you going to retire? And that, I realized, again in hindsight, was sort of a safe passage into this murky, scary zone of later life and how to think about it. And also a safe way, because I could interview people over 80 who work. That's what I did. I started a blog called SoWhenAreYouGoingToRetire.com, not very originally. And I started interviewing people over 80 who work. And, it was easy to find them. And it was safe. It was a way to talk about oldness through the eyes of older people who were continuing to do and be in the world as they had when they were younger. And I met millions of people in 2 seconds. It was easy to find them, and that didn't surprise me. But what did surprise me was how everything, I also started researching, because that's what I do, and everything I learned about longevity, both from speaking with them and from research, and we're not talking digging in dusty library stacks here, 30-second search on the internet, was so much more positive and so much more nuanced than what I thought I knew about what it was like to be that old. And that was the catalyst for this project. Why the discrepancy? Why don't we know these things? We don't know the things about life after divorce for women because we live, shocker, spoiler alert, in a sexist and patriarchal society. And also ageism does factor in to some degree. Mm-hmm. And we don't know these things about ageism because we live in an ageist, sexist, patriarchal society. And also because capitalism, if aging is a problem, we can be persuaded to buy stuff to fix it or stop it or cure it. All those words have big air quotes around them when it's not fixable or curable, which is lucky because it's not a disease and it's not a problem.
Right. Snaps. So I was just curious, just to hear a little bit more about how your experience of aging has shifted as you've delved into this yourself. And
there was not a particular moment of crisis. I feel like people will throw rotten food at me for saying this, but I completely sailed through menopause. I had for many years a wonderful half-time job at the Museum of Natural History here in New York, which is one place that does not discriminate by age. So I wasn't facing losing my job. And I had, always an interesting freelance career. So I think it was more just sort of a free-floating anxiety about getting older, as we all do, and not knowing what it looked like and feeling that, the life I was living at 55 and hoped to keep living to some degree was going to, run into some, like a boat, into shoals, and what were they? And I'm, sometimes a metaphor for me is, when I was a little girl, and thought there was a monster under the bed, I would jump onto the bed from as far away as I could get so it wouldn't grab my ankles. And when it comes to aging, there is a monster under the bed. You are going to get older, and there's two bad things that are inevitable. You're going to lose people you've known all your life, and some part of your body is going to fall apart. But nothing else is inevitable. And for me in particular, but I think also for most people, just looking, creeping up to the bedspread and lifting it up and seeing what's there is way less fearsome than just not looking. And when we live in this age denial oriented culture, because denial, pretending we're never going to get old, we're not like those old people, when in fact they represent the future you know, that's where ageism takes root, and that's what causes all this anxiety and segregation and separation and all this stuff. Once you look, right, it's less fearsome, and that's the first step.
What are the problems? What are the things that we don't see? Why don't we see people aging, and how does that affect us? Like, how does that affect how we look at ourselves? How does it affect our fear of the future?
It starts in our own attitudes towards aging and age itself, because we are all ageist. We all grew up in a culture that bombards us with messages that old people are ugly, are incompetent, are useless, with starting in early childhood, which is when attitudes towards race and gender start to form. Look at cartoons, you know, Grandpa Simpson. Look at children's books. I know, these placid, you know, featureless grannies. All those messages affect all of us. And until you stop and think about them, we're not conscious of them. And those messages become part of our identity and become, you know, it's unconscious bias. And dealing with unconscious bias is difficult and unpleasant. So the very first step is to look at your own attitudes towards aging and think about, you know, what they are. I mean, how do you feel about getting older? And where do those feelings come from is the next step. One huge factor in this society is that there is so much age segregation. And, you know, I don't know if you all went to the Women's March or something like that. You know, when you look around and you see all ages, I think it feels fantastic and feels natural. It's like, oh, this is how life should be. And this is how life was until urbanization came in, and people started, you know, and capitalism started separating workers of different ages, and old age became a problem in the 20th century, and retirement homes and nursing homes were invented. And so one of the problems is that we don't tend to age mingle that much.
Right.
And if you don't mix with people who look different from you, whether they're a different color or a different gender or, you know, different age, then they seem distant
Scary.
and other. And this othering thing is the source of all prejudice. Seeing a group of people as other than yourself, whether it's other sports team or other color or other sexual orientation. The bizarre thing about ageism is that other is your own future older self, which makes no sense. No prejudice makes sense. Okay, all prejudice is irrational and unjustifiable. But the fact that, and we're afraid of getting older for legitimate reasons, not only because we will face cultural stigma until we have an anti-ageism movement and overthrow that, but also because there are legitimate things, you know, we're worried about getting sick or ending up alone or running out of money. And those fears are legitimate and real. I'm not a Pollyanna that, you know, eat enough spinach and it's all going to be great. You know, maybe it will be, maybe you'll be lucky, but we're going to need all kinds of support from between our ears and each other and you know, social and economic institutions in order to have the old age we want.
One of the most absurd things in the world is that we all dread the one thing that we know is going to happen.
It's crazy.
Like, how could that make a happy society? We don't talk about death. And as a result, we're terrified of aging. What it does is it creates an entire society that is paralyzed by this fear, I think. I think it trickles down into every single solitary thing. Now it's, you're right. I think that, ultimately, I think the obsession with Kim Kardashian, and I think the, and the similar, thing of just like everything having to be smooth, everything having to
this plastic perfection.
Yeah, like this plastic perfection, and people are worried about that at like 16 or 17, 18 years old.
People start having Botox preemptively.
But how is that? How could that possibly be a recipe for happiness?
Right. How whether you know it consciously or in your lizard brain.
What are you gonna do? Like, inevitably you're gonna not it's coming.
It's coming, right? And the more you know that monster is
gotta
under
own
the
it.
bed.
Yeah.
But the monster part is not the getting old. The monster part is how we deal
it.
with it
Yeah.
culturally, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we need to change. If we were talking about the role of women or in society, think what a central role sexism, right? Institutionalized segregation and discrimination would play in that discussion. The role of ageism is equally central to any discussion
Right.
about how we deal globally with this amazing phenomenon that represents a triumph of public health. I mean, longer lives correlate with women's reproductive rights, not surprisingly, with higher education levels, with less warfare, with better health maintenance. It's a fantastic achievement, and yet it's framed as this disaster, because then people can make money off it.
But I just think on a very personal, day-to-day, fundamental happiness level, if you are hating yourself like the design is, so that we buy these stupid products that don't work and don't matter, at the end of the day, we want to be happy.
Right.
And we want to love life, and we want to feel good.
And we want to be comfortable in
and
our
we want to
skins.
matter, and we don't want to be invisible. I just find personally at 60, it's just the most, I love the challenge of like, I am not going to be invisible. Sorry. It's just get louder,
Yeah,
and
no.
I, because I will not accept being unhappy because I'm being told by who.
One of the very early giant data points that I learned back when it was the project about older workers was the fact that people are happiest at the beginnings and the ends of their lives. And when I can't tell you how skeptical I was. I thought, well, they must have found, two rich octogenarians and given them a cookie and said, how's it going? And this obtains across class. I thought it must be a function if you're healthy or if you're wealthy. It obtains everywhere in the world, and it is a function of the way aging itself affects the brain, which is kind of amazing. The invisibility discourse is really interesting and really loaded. I hear a lot of women saying, I became invisible, at a certain point in my 40s or 50s. I think what most women mean, and it's not entirely heteronormative, is that when they walk in a room, heads don't turn. And especially men don't look at them and see them as sexual objects anymore. Well, if we give men that power, we reinforce the idea that the most important thing about us is how we look. And that reinforces, lookism, sexism, ageism, patriarchy. If we can stop competing to look young, if you and I don't size each other up when we walk in the room and see who's wrinklier or who's fatter or who has a man next to her, and just refuse to play that game.
Totally.
That is where liberation lies. We have a lot to learn from the body acceptance movement, right?
You have time to evolve. You have time to challenge yourself and grow. And, it's like,
When you're older?
yeah, like life is if you're lucky to have that opportunity, it's an amazing opportunity to become more of yourself.
Yeah. I mean, they say people become sort of more condensed versions of themselves, and I think it's true. I mean, there is that fundamental paradox that you mentioned. No one wants to die young, but no one wants to get old. I wrote a really cranky blog post not long ago saying, if aging
funny.
is so awful,
Yeah.
if aging is so awful, how come no one wants to be any younger?
Right.
And no matter how unwoke people are to this, if you ask them, no, do you actually want to go back to your 40s, your 30s, your 20s? You can't just swap out the battered bits, right? You have to actually unlearn everything. No one says yes, because we know, even if it's not conscious, that aging is a source of enormous power, and that we are the product of all the things we've done and been and eaten and gone to.
It's a great experience. Like I have to say for myself, I like myself more. I feel
Me too.
better, like in myself, in my body.
Me too.
And I'm much freer in terms
Yeah.
of what I say, what I what I wear.
Yeah, we are less
And I feel
concerned with what people
and
think.
whether it's true or not, I feel more attractive. And I don't really give a shit whether I am or not, which is really great.
But think
like
about,
I don't know. I don't care if that's a reality.
But it's a reality
But I
if
feel
it's
it.
the reality between your ears. I mean,
Yeah.
if let's, for the sake of argument, if the goal is to continue to be desired, in this narrow sense, right? To have other people think we're attractive. So let's say one measure of that is whether you're sexually active, which in PS, it's fine to not be. But look at your friends who are sexually active. They are not the thinnest. They are not the blondest. They're not the youngest. They are the people who feel like you just said you feel, that our lovers are lucky and that we are
Let's
confident.
tell it like it is about that.
I mean, that's attractive. You know, that
Right,
confidence is the ultimate allure.
Yeah.
Can
And
I hear?
Sorry.
Well, can I hear some examples from your personal life of like the ways that you feel freer, more powerful, like more anything with age, like than you did when you were maybe my age in your 20s?
10,000 ways. I mean,
Yeah,
definitely more confident in my body. You know, I mean,
Can
when
you
I
talk
was,
about that?
I mean, when I was, you know, certainly in my teens and my 20s and on. I mean, I would say it's been steadily diminishing over time. You know, I hate admitting this, but where my hips meet my thighs, there's this bulge outward. And when I, you know, was young, it was just this mortifying flaw. You know, I'm very flat-chested. I can remember, I don't know, maybe I was 15, like looking down in the bathtub and going, really? Like, this is it? Like, you know, now I love the way that the fact that my tits look the way they did when I was 14. And, you know, and the stuff that seemed a terrible, hideous, awful, awful problem when I was 16 seems pretty okay now. And I love that. I mean, I'm sorry to reduce it to something so
No, it's
surface,
really.
but,
I think this is exactly what is on people's minds.
Yeah.
It's good to say.
You know, what else? Yeah. Keep it going. What else is other parts of your life that you feel more?
I'm also, I mean, I can't imagine that I would have the courage to become a public figure when I was earlier. It doesn't come naturally to me. But now I have the confidence and also, I don't know, sort of the vision, if you will, to say this stuff is fucking important. Can I say fucking on your podcast?
Yes.
Okay, good. And that I need to, you know, put that first, whether I use that as a sort of an icebreaker in front of me, or whether it's something I hide behind, it doesn't matter. I can use it to be in the world. And I feel like I am better at using the tools and opportunities around me and better at prioritizing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm better at figuring out what's important and what I need to devote my energies to.
Yeah, I think it's really refreshing for when you said earlier that you're a late bloomer and that you didn't like find your stride in your career until like your 40s. Is that what you said?
Well,
Or
I didn't
even
start
now?
writing till I was in my
Right.
40s, but back then it never would have occurred to me to become a public speaker. And, you know, that just sort of happened. A friend who runs a theater festival in Amherst, she used to come stay with me. And she was one of the few people I would piss and moan to about how stuck I was and how unhappy it was making me. And she has a theme every year. And she said, okay, the theme this year is going to be aging. And all her theater friends said, oh my God, don't do that. You know, no one will come. You'll lose all your subscribers. Well, she tripled her subscriber base because we are all eager for a way to talk and think about aging that rings truer to our experience. And she asked me to do the opening monologue. And that became the genesis of the main talk, a talk I still give. And that's when I thought, oh, I'll still never have to write another book. I can just speak and tweet and so on. But that was sort of the breakthrough.
How old were you?
I guess that was about 5 years into this project, so I was probably around 60.
I started StyleLikeU when I was 50, and was totally lost. I had been a fashion stylist and for 25 years and taught yoga and was just totally trying to figure it out. And I started this at 50.
Life is long. It's really long. I mean, I'm probably going to live till I'm 90, and you may well live to be 100. The way in which life is measured now was built for a society of shorter lives with these, you know, silo of first you go to school and then you work and then you retire, and it's completely obsolete. So we have this incredible opportunity to reframe the way we think about things. It's not all ageism, the resistance. Sociologists call this structural lag. It takes time for institutions and roles to catch up, which is why it's so important to change the narrative about aging now.
Yeah. What were some of the most inspiring stories you heard from the older workers that you interviewed and met with?
One of them, you should have done my dad, who's 85, still going strong.
Full-time lawyer.
Sorry to interrupt you, but he's a full-time. I kept trying to find a place to interject this, but I have two parents my parents are both around 85, and nothing has changed. He works full-time.
Surely things have changed.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
what I mean is they live their lives. They continue to live their lives as they've always lived their lives, is what I meant.
have they done any thinking about how they will live their lives when something significant does change?
They don't talk about that so much, which I think we would love them to talk about.
Yeah,
more.
that would be great if they would talk more about that.
I mean, there's a fantastic project called the Conversation Project, started by Ellen Goodman, which is how to start that conversation. You mentioned before, we don't talk about dying. We don't. We're starting to. Death cafes and
Buddhists do.
What's death
doulas. This is a movement to get together and talk about death. There are now death doulas is emerging as a field. The hospice movement, palliative care, those are all specific trends that are helping us die better. I see a movement against ageism as integrally bound to that, as you inferred, because if we don't talk about aging and getting older, if we're stuck in this delusion that everything can stay the same, we're not going to prepare for that change, which is inevitable. And Ellen Goodman started the Conversation Project as a way from either end. Suppose I'm your parents and I want to get you, my kids don't want to talk about it. Suppose you would like your parents to talk about it. Of all sorts of very subtle ways to start the conversation where it's not like, what do you want to do when you can't, when you have a tube down your throat? But we could never get my partner's parents to talk about it either. And an example I remember from it is, are you worried about more, it's a 1 to 5 sliding scale, right? So are you worried about too much intervention or too little? Which is a very non-binary way to talk about these big, scary things. Again, that's a monster under the bed. Once you look at it, it is less scary. I thought I had the talk with my kids because I'm like, pull the plug. Well, I looked at the Conversation Project and I sat in the garden with my kids who really didn't want to do it. And 2 interesting things happened. One is my son said, well, what if you're hit by a cab, outside the house? And I'm like, I want that liver transplant. And he said, well, Ma, that would be an extreme intervention. So I was like, oh, right. We haven't really talked this through because it's an ongoing conversation. And my daughter's partner said 2 days later, she said, I was really dreading that, but I feel a lot better and I need to do it with my parents. Not to judge your parents, they are exactly like my in-laws who managed to sail out pretty much under their own terms. They drove to their weekend house into their late 80s every weekend, and every weekend were pissed at us that we didn't want to spend our weekends in Westchester with them. But it is a delusion. It does deprive your family of meaningful conversations about it, and it makes it harder to help them have what they want. Autonomy requires collaborators. No one is independent ever. We all need help. Look at the fantastic crew you have to make this podcast happen. So this idea that we are independent and we're going to stay that way really, really does us no favors.
What's Underneath is brought to you this week by Lola. Known for its line of period products, Lola products are made from 100% organic cotton with no added chemicals, fragrances, synthetics, or dyes. Ever since we interviewed Lauren Wasser for the What's Underneath project in 2016, who lost her leg to toxic shock syndrome, I've realized the importance of knowing what I'm putting into my body when I get my period. And if I'm going to use a tampon, I now always make sure that it's 100% organic cotton. Not only does Lola do this, but they also deliver each month so I never run out and can avoid the frantic trip to the drugstore. Lola period product subscriptions are fully customizable so you can choose your mix of products, your perfect mix of absorbency, your number of boxes, and the frequency of your deliveries. Lola's subscription is super flexible. You can change, skip, or cancel at any time. You can pick your products choosing from pads, liners, or organic cotton tampons, which are available either with a BPA-free plastic applicator or in an environmentally non-applicator format. To top it off, Lola also offers sex products made with women in mind and specifically formulated to help maintain vaginal pH and guarantee peace of mind about what's going on and in your body. The Sex by Lola line is available for one-off purchase or subscription. You can also add it to your period subscription so everything is conveniently delivered on your ideal schedule. We also love Lola because it's a company founded by women for women. They are committed to creating transparent and trustworthy products, and they encourage candid conversations about the experiences we as women have throughout our entire reproductive lives, without shame or taboo. Lola is also do good with your purchase, which means that for every purchase, they donate feminine care products to a homeless shelter across the U.S. We love Lola, but don't just take our word for it. Try it for yourself. For 40% off your first order, visit mylola.com and enter the promo code STYLE to get started. That's right, for 40% off your first order, go to mylola.com today and use the code STYLE.
Yeah, there's a fear around the vulnerability of death.
Yes, there is. And the vulnerability of,
or illness.
Anything, just needing someone.
Shame and fear.
It's shame. Thank you for bringing up shame. I mean, it's about stigma. This is a society that valorizes independence in a bogus way because we're none of us, again, ever independent. And I mean, the one little thing I do myself, I mean, I am super healthy except for my bones. My back always hurts. I have arthritis. Various bits of me collapse on a regular basis. And not that long ago, I mean, when I moved to Williamsburg, where the median age is about 21, I said to myself, and this was during the floundering phase, well, when I can't get up and down the subway steps by myself, I'm just going to have to move because then I won't be keeping up, right? And then, then I learn more, then I realize, no, that's one solution, but it is not, do you really want to secede? And what I now make myself do is ask someone, hello, to help me with my bag. And people are always thrilled to help, right? These are two-way transactions. That's another whole piece of it that never gets acknowledged. It's good for them to help me. I don't think they look at me and say, oh, there's a, little pathetic little old lady. I wish I could get down to the platform 2.5 seconds faster. People beam, they grab it. It's a little embarrassing because they hoist my suitcase as though it was a lunchbox. And then I feel like, dang, that thing felt heavy to me. But, I get where I'm going. People are happy to help, and it's good for them. It's good for them too.
Totally.
Can we just go back a little bit more to you talking honestly with your kids about, death, dying, illness, and just to further that conversation a little bit. I'm curious about your thoughts as time goes on how vulnerable you feel it is that you feel it's okay to be with your kids, like how
That's
vulnerable that you feel is.
How long ago was it? 3 years ago, I got a serious kidney infection, and I ended up in the emergency room. And the reason you hear a smile in my voice is that I had decided to, which I had mentioned to my kids, to dye my hair white. I'm happy to tell you the story behind that because it's an interesting one. And I had talked about it and I totally, so there I am in the emergency room with my partner and I thought I should tell my kids, and my second thought was, I don't want them to see me so vulnerable. And my third thought, which honest to God was instantly on its heels, who are you kidding? That's why you have kids. They're adult. This is probably not the last time they're going to come and find you in the hospital. And of course, you should tell them. And they both came, and I didn't think that this was the first time they'd seen me with all white hair. So they came in the hospital and pulled back the curtain, and I saw from their faces, and I was like, do I look that bad? And then I burst out laughing, even though I felt really shitty. So that was funny. I mean, the thing that I have realized about these conversations is that they have to be ongoing. I used to be a lot more certain. And what I know now is that I don't know what I'm going to want. A phrase I use a lot in my talks came from a geriatrician and ethicist that I listened to at Johns Hopkins probably about 10 years ago. He said his mantra was a Mexican saying that the appearance of the bull changes when you enter the ring. right? It looks different to the matador. And behind him was a chart of women in labor, with the x-axis being whether they did or didn't want anesthesia, and the y-axis being how long they'd been in labor. And by the time they'd been in labor for a million bazillion hours, a lot more of them wanted anesthesia because the bull looks different. You don't know what you're going to want. I changed his phrase to the bull looks different. When we see an older person, hobbling, or someone with a disability, because we are genuinely, as human beings, afraid of illness and disability, that's just human, but also because we're ageist and we are barraged by messages that say, oh, they're useless, they're sad, we don't want to look at them, they make us uncomfortable. We grossly underestimate the quality of life of older people and people with disabilities, right? The experience from within is different. There's a geriatrician, he's a psychologist who runs this he's the psychologist on duty at this huge retirement home and nursing home in Miami. And he told a story about greeting a new patient who was in her 90s, and she had just lost her husband of 72 years. And he came in and said, I'm so sorry for your loss, blah, blah, blah. And she said, he was a monster, and I am finally free. And he told this story on himself as, once again, that it's called the psychologist's fallacy. You can never know what another person is experiencing, which is another reason we need to mix up the generations. Because, I'm probably going to need a cane. I'm probably going to need a walker. I have a zillion young friends, and I know they're going to see that even if I have a cane or a walker, I'm still going to get out and have a ton of fun, and it's going to make those experiences less alien and less frightening for them.
I was at this gathering like last weekend in Southern Oregon of an all women gathering, and it was all ages, and it was like this beautiful camping experience for like 5 days, and it was really striking like how awesome it felt to be with so many ages in like this social thing. I was like, wow, this is too rare that this is something that I'm like even noticing as an anomaly.
It's become worse. But, when I was your age in New York, it was when I was in my 20s in New York, it was less stratified. Everything has become, I think, more stratified. I think the media has. Do you agree with me?
Like parties.
I don't know. I trust
feel
your
like
observation. I wasn't even noticing older people when I was younger, which I think, again, is a little bit human.
Right.
It's really, really hard to imagine getting older. Part of it's just human. But also, since, we live in a society that segregates older people.
We weren't seeing faces when we were in our 20s. We when people aged, we saw their real face. Over time, you don't even see.
But when you see that horrible, plastic surgery sheen,
you don't see the real. What I'm saying is that I was used to seeing someone's real face age, and I didn't think it was. I remember not thinking that was
ugly
or bad.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful, but what I'm saying is I think it's become more
scary,
exaggerated.
That might be also particularly not extreme, but exaggerated if you worked in fashion. Fashion and
but
Hollywood.
I mean, if you look at the media now and how extreme the retouching is, or the people that they, like everything, as we were talking about the Kim Kardashian moment, I mean, it's that has become like what we worship. Whereas when I just my experience, I didn't worship that.
Yeah.
I knew many cooler, older people in where I was working, and I worshiped them.
I think that's going to change. I mean, Allure magazine did ban the term anti-aging from its pages. There's now a move to get two big companies in Britain to do the same. Boots Chemists, which is their sort of CVS, and another company that I don't remember the name of. I think it's going to change as the baby boom, of which I am dead center. I was born in 1952. I don't think all of us are going to go silently, and I don't think we're going to agree to, cut up our faces and become sort of frozen versions of ourselves.
I was sitting with someone on a plane in her late 40s or 50-ish around, and telling her about, what we do with StyleLikeU, and she immediately lit up about the gray hair issue. Like, it was kind of new news, like to not dye it, you know, like just
So many people dye their hair. It's wild. Yeah.
like it's just such a huge thing.
I mean,
yeah.
I had this years ago, this sort of fabulous idea that when we dye our hair just to cover the gray, especially, you know, people who don't like doing it, as opposed to people who've always dyed their hair or, you know, do it as a creative thing, we make ourselves invisible as older women. And older men, you know, men do it too in much lesser number. And when a group is invisible, so are the issues that affect us. And I had this, and you know, if everyone stopped, you know, if you could wave a magic wand, 3/4 of the people on the street have gray hair. Okay, I mean, it's enormous. And I thought, wouldn't it be awesome to have the year of letting our hair go gray, so that people could see how many we are, how varied we are, how gorgeous we are. And I made the mistake of posting that on my This Chair Rocks Facebook page, and people went nuts. They're like, don't tell me what to do with my hair. If I didn't dye my hair, I would lose my job, and I've got children to support. Back off. I would look terrible with gray hair. Basically, don't tell me what to do. Fair enough. And then someone said, you go first. So I thought, well, that's fair. So I went and bleached my entire head white. Now, I am a sort of a cloddish and insensitive person. I'm not terribly perceptive. I didn't notice any difference at all. Except it was kind of cool because I had never, late bloomer, I had never dyed my hair. I'd never even streaked it. So I was sort of taken with this. But I learned a lot about not judging people and not, not telling anyone what they should do with their appearance. We each need to age in our own way and in our own time. If you need Botox or a facelift in order to feel confident in the world, go forth. But we're not going to become visible in all our power as older women until we stop doing it. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge abstract ask. I get that.
Right.
And no judgment against anyone. I swear, I learned my lesson and I mean it. Mm-hmm. But trying to pass for younger is like trying to pass for straight if you're gay. It's like trying to pass for white if you're a person of color. It's not good for us, because it's rooted in shame about something that should not be shameful.
Totally.
And it gives a pass to the discrimination that makes those behaviors necessary.
Totally. What are some of the other things, like language-wise, that you think should change? Like, and obviously banning like anti-aging as like a good, like a thing to be as a positive thing would be one. I'm assuming that reframing or redefining like the word old, it would be good, because like to me it's similar to like in the body positive movement, how like fat, so many people are reclaiming fat as like a good thing.
It would be fat. Great. I'm old. When old is reclaimed.
You look old. Oh, thanks.
Right. Like, I mean, I don't think we're there yet. That's why when I was writing the book and literally got tired of typing older people or older Americans, I just shortened it to olders and youngers. Mm-hmm. So I like to say I've solved the problem of what to call old people, because we're not ready yet to claim old. It will be fantastic when we're there, but most of us north of wherever, people are always saying, well, when do you become old? Well, there's no such thing, which is why I like older and younger, because it busts up this fake binary, that you're going to wake up one morning on the wrong side of some divide, and
you're always older and you're always younger.
Right. You're always, when you're a kid, remember when you're a kid, how focused you are on so-and-so is a little bit younger and you can't wait to be older. So there's that. One of my pet peeves is the use of the word aging when the word should be older. Sometimes aging is absolutely the right word. Population aging, it's a real thing. But everyone is aging. So it bugs me when people talk about their aging parents, for example, or aging celebrities, as though everyone in the audience was, cryogenically frozen. Right. Another word I really hate is elderly. For a couple of reasons. It's usually paired with the elderly. And as we age, we become more different from one another. Think about it. A group of 7-year-olds, of course, every newborn is a unique individual, but 7-year-olds have a lot more in common than 27-year-olds, who are a lot more homogenous than 67-year-olds, and so on. So the older you are, the less your chronological age says about you, developmentally, physically, cognitively, right? What you're interested in, your age is ever less important, which is sort of nutty when you think that stereotyping is the basis of all prejudice. So the basis of ageism is that all older people are boring or can't use smartphones or don't have sex or whatever it is. So stereotypes are always wrong, but they're especially stupid when it comes to age. So to describe older people as elderly implies that they belong to this homogenous group of the elderly. And another, rule in these politically correct times is to call people what they want to be called. And I have never heard anyone describe themselves as elderly.
Lily and I had a thing the other day.
Also,
we
it's
had a little
yucky.
argument.
We had a
It's just
tiff.
a yucky word.
Lily and I had a tiff because she was writing an Instagram post, and she wanted to talk about the olders at the gathering that she was at, and she used the word old folks. And everything inside of me just went like.
We had an argument.
And we went back and forth, and it was on text, and she said, well, you just have to get more comfortable with the word old, like I am with fat. And I said, it's not about old.
It's
you
the
could
folks.
use it's old folks together.
Yeah,
to me, it's like elderly. It's like
I think we think of the old folks home.
Right.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I just like I enjoy the word folks to describe like groups of people and any type. Like I think it's like a sweet word.
I'm trying to learn not to say.
But I get why
you
it has
guys, because it's gendered. I'm
Right.
trying to.
I
break
think about
habit.
that all the time.
I don't
I'm
say
like,
you
oops,
guys
I'm
anymore.
saying it all the time.
Right.
I know.
I know.
I mean,
guys.
you're both right, of course. You didn't mean it condescendingly.
Yeah.
But if someone described my partner, and he's 72, as, the old folks in the corner, I wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
Now, one reason I wouldn't like it is my own internalized ageism.
Right.
It shouldn't bother me.
Right.
Especially if I trust you and don't think it came
From a negative
derogatory point. But honestly, use olders, the problem is solved.
Olders. Okay.
Olders.
So we're going to make olders into the new
official, you can get a
word.
right.
Yeah.
I'll give you like a gold seal of approval, approved by this chair rocks.
Okay, great. Yeah.
And then, of course, if we believe in the spirit going on,
Like you could be young.
if you believe in this, that the spirit just continues, you can look at it. This astrologer once said about Lily and I, and related to StyleLikeU and how we're doing what we're supposed to be doing in the world. And she said, you just came in sooner.
Oh, that's nice. You got here
And
at
it's
just
like
the
a
right
great
time.
way to look at it.
And I mean, a word that I don't like because it is so often used it's used to advertise a ton of anti-aging cosmetics, for example, is agelessness.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that yesterday.
Yeah,
I'm over
because
agelessness.
what it usually means is like without your years.
Right,
And-
it's like
and
you're
what
it's
is-
like you're promoting that they
You want
are
your
not
years.
their
I
years.
want my years.
Yeah.
Do not take them away from me.
Totally.
But I was doing a talk radio show in Minneapolis, and someone called in, and she disagreed. She said, I feel like my spirit is ageless. And that is,
I
of
feel
course,
that.
a completely legitimate point of view, but you're not trying. But I think
Right.
it is often used in an ageist way. I mean, another language thing and a way to sort of help raise your own consciousness. Oh, and can I just plug one thing? On my website, available for a free download, is a consciousness raising guide. It's called Who Me Ageist? How to Start a Consciousness Raising Group Around Age Bias. Consciousness raising is the tool that catalyzed the women's movement because women came together and compared notes and realized that what they had been thinking of as personal problems were actually widely shared collective problems that required collective political action. That's what you see happening now around Me Too, of course. So that's where we need to go with ageism as well, that if you don't like the way you look in the mirror, well, that's not because you didn't have enough facelifts or don't know, or sat in the sun when you were a kid. It's the problem is how we frame, how we look at ourselves, and we all need to make this, way of looking differently collectively. Back to language, think about the way you use the words old and young. Do they actually refer to things that haven't been around a long time? Or do you, I hear a zillion older people saying, I feel young, or I don't feel old. And what they really mean is, I
feel
don't
good.
Or I feel sexy, or I feel with it.
Well, it's funny because
And you can feel that way when you're at
Old.
any age, just like you can feel miserable and like
Totally.
the biggest loser in the world at 13. So only use the word that describes how you actually feel
Right.
instead of old/young to mean good thing/bad thing.
Totally.
So is it bad? Because one of the things that
Yes, it's bad.
No, what I was
Whatever it
going to
is.
say is that
You feel young.
No, that I think the joke is. I feel like the joke about aging and dying is actually on us. Because it's become a tool for marketing and capitalism. The joke is on us, because personally, as time goes on, because I feel younger. But like, is that a bad thing to say?
No, but you're saying you feel better.
What
Yeah.
you totally own your age. You said 20 minutes ago that the reason you feel so good in your skin and so powerful is precisely because you are as old as you are.
I think we get younger or something.
Nobody gets younger.
Well, what I mean is that we...
Yeah, but that's exactly what she's saying, is that word isn't the actually
Right,
correct way to
that's
describe the
interesting.
feeling. You
Yeah.
feel more spirited, you feel more free, you
Right.
feel more
It's the wrong word
awesome.
to use.
But why
It
is
the
that
wrong word to
associated?
use? Because it reinforces the idea that younger is better.
Right. And it's the same with
And
saying...
you're so right. You're so right about it. You're so right about... Sorry, just hold your thought for a second. You're so right about about that. It's that is a really awesome point to make, because it's not like I want people to be clear about this. It's not because you don't have problems. You continue to have problems. I mean, I struggle with, certain anxiety, health issues, things that I didn't have before, or I did have before, or whatever. It doesn't mean that you're
about getting older. That's hard.
well, or that you're, it's not like it's perfect. It's just that it really, it's more that it hasn't, it's just a different variation.
It's just different.
Yeah,
as we
it's
move
a different
along.
variation.
Right.
But it's
I mean,
the same thing as, this is why I was saying earlier that ideally in an ideal world, old wouldn't be synonymous with bad and young wouldn't be synonymous with good. And you could use I feel old in like a good way, hypothetically.
That's the goal.
That's
That's the
a
goal.
dream.
So
Similar
like fat.
to,
I think fat
it's
is a
similar
really
to-
good analogy.
It's like people say, oh my God, you look thin, and it's assumed to be a compliment, and you look fat is assumed to be an insult, but that's
Exactly.
also not how it should be.
Exactly.
So that's the hashtag dream.
But this is
Yeah.
really, I mean,
it's a great goal.
Yeah.
You
should be proudly saying I feel old, like in the dream world, rather than I feel younger.
Listen, I'm not there yet.
I
I
feel
don't like
older.
to admit this. I will happily cop to older and do all the time, but old is a stretch for me.
Yeah.
It does still seems like some absolute end stage that I'm not at.
Totally.
And
Right.
that's a little delusory. I mean,
I feel the same way.
Another thing is, is how people still talk about older people as them, not us, even when they're in their 60s and 70s, when clearly you can call yourself whatever, but they be us, right? I mean, I got a lot more road behind me than I do ahead.
Isn't that sort of just like the feeling that, like, are you ever an adult? Like, what is it being an adult?
It is
really
like
feel
that.
Yeah,
It is
Or
like
people
that.
want to, well, when is old? Well, there's no such question.
Well, that's why
It's
I
a
think
false-
the joke is on us. Like, that's what I mean, is that it is this continuum.
Exactly.
It's
And
a continuum.
spectrum.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there is no old-young divide. And the media and capitalism use that divide to separate us,
Like
and
all
segregate
divides.
us, and pit, old versus young, so that we are competing instead of organizing together to change society, to make it easier
Completely.
for young people too. I mean, being young is no picnic. Your 20s are really, really hard. I have never met anyone who wanted to go back to their 20s. And one of the reasons they're hard is because of this cultural message that if you're not perfecting your career, finding your mate, having fabulous sex every minute, and of course, looking perfect.
Getting married and having children.
Getting married and having children, at least starting
That's the
that,
big one.
then you are failing because after 30, all gonna suck.
Right.
So that's
ridiculous.
an additional
It's
awful
absurd.
message.
Yeah.
And if we
We're like, we're young and dumb. Like, we don't know anything yet. We don't know
it's
ourselves
hard.
yet.
You're figuring out really, really hard things.
I
And
I will say for
absurd.
myself that I had my son at 29 and Lily at 31. And I observe, for instance, a very good friend of mine who just had a baby at 40. And just the way she is a mother at this age is so, I'm salivating because of, the wisdom that she has being 10 years older than I was. And I think there's such value in that. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing.
Do you have any remaining in your life, like, sources of shame?
there's things about myself I don't like.
Like,
I wish I were less anxious. I wish I were better at living in the moment. I wish I were a better sharer. I have hang-ups about my body still, you know,
Like what?
sexual stuff. You know, should I try things that I haven't tried? And then I go down the wormhole of I'm 65 and I've had a lot of fun so far, so why should I? And then that goes into the wormhole of
the should.
Of course you should, because it's out there for the sampling, and don't you want to, you know, have as big a life as you can, you know, as varied and diverse experiences as you can. So I don't love that, but it's also, you know, it's human.
Yeah, totally.
Do you ever feel the limitation of time? So this extra pressure to do things, like to get somewhere, or just
to some degree, you know, I think, I mean, you know, if you, I mean, time is finite, and there is not an infinite amount of time to get stuff done. One thing I worry about because of my issues with my bones is physical mobility. I mean, we're going to visit a couple of national parks this summer for my birthday because I'm concerned that in the not too distant future I won't be able to hike. You know, so I'm aware of that.
Why is that? Why is that?
Because of what?
Because of
Or
arthritis,
just
my
arthritis.
bad back. I have, you know, my feet hurt, boring stuff, and so I better do this while I can. But on the other hand, I'm incredibly lucky to be able to go do it. You know, I also think that I have an ongoing argument with a much younger friend who thinks that it would be fabulous if we can just do life extension and live forever, which not coincidentally is a cause, you know, dear to the hearts of wealthy white men exclusively. I think that the fact that life is finite is what gives it meaning. And a zillion philosophers and Greek myths agree with me. I didn't just cook this up. It is the fact, another thing that I learned early in my research, which bowled me over. I just assumed that one of the many things that must suck about getting older, I literally envisioned the shadow of the Grim Reaper, you know, stretching across your bedstead. And not only does everything suck, but you get to be more and more scared of death being closer and closer. That's not the way it works. The longer people live, the less afraid they are of dying. This is the psychological underpinnings of that U curve of happiness. Knowing that time is finite makes us better at living in the moment and appreciating the here and now. It's not necessarily a function of age. You see the same change in young people who have mortal illnesses. We get better at choosing what we want to do with our time and who we want to do it with, and in that lies happiness.
Totally. We should sell. It just made me think when you were saying that can you imagine like having celebrations around the time being finite? I mean, just
That would
like
be cool.
literally, you know, just subverting that and going, "Yay! Let's celebrate that." That would be amazing.
I read somewhere that you know, for wedding anniversaries, we give people, you know, the paper and the whatever, all the stuff all through, that at a certain point there should be, for each wedding anniversary or birthday, you should start giving stuff away, which I really like. You know, there should be, because we accumulate
That's
all this
smart.
crap, and what gives
Instead of
things meaning
presents.
is the stories around them, and that we should definitely develop rituals. My partner Bob Stein did a TED talk around this, you know, develop rituals around giving stuff away and what are the stories behind them. Yeah.
That's genius. I want to start that. What is the biggest risk you've taken in your life, do you think?
Well, I left my marriage with two pretty little children. They were 6 and 8 at the time. That was a huge risk. It felt like one.
Can you tell us a little bit more about like taking that leap and what it was like?
I knew I had to do it, and it ended up being, I think, the best thing for everybody. I mean, you'd have to ask my kids, you know,
Why did you have to do it?
Because I couldn't stay in that marriage anymore. I could not be my full self. You know, I was more ambitious, and neither of us knew what to do with that. You know, whatever we did it together. He was the best husband he knew how to be. But I had to make myself small, you know, in order to have the marriage work. And, you know, it was dumb of me. but I didn't know any better, and neither did he. I mean, and then I ended up writing a whole book about it and learning, again, I mean, I got my consciousness raised, learning that this experience was not my personal failing. I mean, not that I didn't bring my own personal weaknesses and strengths to the marriage, of course, but that this is a function of the way patriarchy compresses women's lives so they can serve the marriage, so the marriage can serve the man. And it's not our friend, and it's not the friend of your mate, if they too want an egalitarian relationship. I mean,
How old were you when you got married?
I was 29 when I got married, which I think is one of the reasons I got married, which is really embarrassing to admit.
Because you were turning 30.
Yep.
That's a
And-
good thing to admit, though. I think people need
It's
to
helpful to people.
Yeah.
I
And,
think
you know,
there's a real
so I hope my
terror
book
around
on
that.
divorce keeps some younger women from making that mistake. And I was married for 11 years. So I separated at 39, 40. And, you know, it was a really, really good thing to do, but it was really hard.
And now you've been in a relationship
Yeah,
for how long?
for 25 years. Yeah, with a wonderful, weird man.
Love wonderful, weird people. What are you most afraid of?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm still afraid of dying, but I'm a lot less afraid than I used to be. I mean, I can't even think about something happening to my children. You know, just your thoughts like just crashing into, you know, or my grandchildren. But I'm pretty brave. I mean, that's, you know, the downside is I'm clumsy. It's hard to offend me, but I can be clueless. I'm just sort of a blundering, persistent person. You know, I just get the bit between my teeth and I'm on it, and I'm on it. I'm in this thing, and it's really exciting. And I feel like I used to worry about getting dementia. I mean, I worry about immobility, but much less than I used to, because the bull looks different. You know, it's going to be different from the experience, and I have a ton of younger friends, and honest to God, you know, if I need to get to the dance floor in a wheelchair, they will push me and they will not be embarrassed. And that will help them when they get old.
Totally.
That's a great answer.
Cool. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you very
Pleasure.
much. It was awesome.
We hope you were inspired by this episode.
Until next week, that's it from me, Elisa.
And me, Lily.
If you agree that facades separate us and being radically honest brings us together, help spread the movement for radical self-acceptance by sharing this episode and subscribing to our podcast.
You can also watch our videos by subscribing to our YouTube channel and following us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook using the handle @StyleLikeU.
That's the letter U instead of the word you.
And check out our book, True Style is What's Underneath, The Self-Acceptance Revolution, on Amazon or at a local bookstore near you.
We can't skip ahead to a happy ending or live inside a photoshopped image or an Instagram filter. There's no finding oneself when glossing over the truth.